Welcome everybody to the second installment of the School Transportation Nation podcast. I am Tony Corpin, your host, publisher, and president of STN, School Transportation News. I am with my co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray, our Chief Content Officer, Editor-in-Chief, all things editorial. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you for having me once again, and everybody out there. Hope everyone is doing okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Ryan, lots going on. COVID-19, I feel like, the days are moving slower, though the week is gone. We got lots of updates, lots of things going on, topics. Really want to dive in more to school bus drivers and contractor pay during the COVID-19 pandemic and what that all means. Also want to share a little bit about what's going on just in the industry, just getting a little bit of flavor now that we are a couple weeks into this thing or more. How's that looking out there? So also want to shout out a special thank you to our first podcast sponsor, our friends at TransFinder Corporation. They are sponsoring today's podcast. Thank you very much to them. We really appreciate it. They're really great partners, and we thank them so much for supporting our podcast. So, friends, want to talk to you a little about some of the positive things that are going on out in our industry. Social media, really great thing. We're seeing so many school districts making that extra effort to get those kids breakfast and lunch for the reduced or free lunch programs. I'm seeing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of meals probably around the country are being delivered. School districts are working tirelessly. Our contractors are working tirelessly to help support their communities. Really great thing. Ryan, what are you seeing out there while all this is going on?
You're exactly right. Most school districts are mobilizing their school buses in a different way. Just posted an article online today regarding Gwinnett County Public Schools in the Atlanta area, the largest school district in Georgia and one of the largest in the nation. And it's amazing. They have roughly 500 buses or so, about 500 routes. They've gone ahead on a dime and switched those to delivering meals. They are just coming out of spring break this week. So there was some local church organizations and nonprofits that were filling the void this week for the students. But this is an amazing stat. Through just 2 weeks of operating these mobile deliveries, the school buses were responsible for 83% of all the meals delivered. That's 244,000 out of 293,000 total meals from roughly March 13th through the 27th.
That's a lot of meals. That's a lot of meals.
A lot of meals. So they're keeping kids, about 25,000 students a day on average, approximately, or who are receiving these lunches. Now, when the school resumes on Monday, they are going to be providing 2 meals a day. So they will be providing both breakfast and lunch at the same time. So those meals are going to skyrocket, probably the number of kids as well. We'll see how that goes.
And Ryan, that's just a round of applause for our industry. I mean, this is the story you hear out there. Food deliveries, supply deliveries, technology, Wi-Fi, mobile learning. There's just so much good stuff going on. I mean, people were asking me, what do you really think? How's the industry going to shake out? And, I think right now you just have to have empathy. You got to be a human being, right? You got to feel for everybody out there. And I think people are going way above and beyond. I know a lot of people in the industry, Ryan. I've seen a lot of companies. I think we posted a story on our site about what companies are doing, if that's making face shields or masks, or I think I saw one HSM, they're making hospital beds. There's so many great things our companies are doing to support their communities and the medical arena. Just so much great stuff. Ryan, what are you hearing out there on that front?
More of the same. I mean, most of this industry is obviously predicated on service, right? First to the students, the children, and to a larger extent the communities. So really, what we're seeing is unheralded. right now with this coronavirus. Saw a stat the other day that the number of deaths is projected to start rivaling those in World War II alone. That's pretty amazing stuff right there. And what we're seeing is the nation mobilizing in a way that we haven't seen in generations. And the school bus industry is just a microcosm of that. Again, service oriented. The mission has changed. We used that in a headline last week, in fact, talking about the food delivery and how the operations have really shifted. But really, everyone in this industry is about not only safety, but about providing for others. And that's what we're really seeing right now, just in a different way than we've ever been used to.
And then, Ryan, what is the current state of coronavirus and school closures? Because obviously that's the topic everybody's talking about, right? So can you give me a little more on that?
Sure. Well, it's changing every day. I mentioned this in the first podcast. Education Week, which is the trade newspaper, if you will, for the educational community, really the K-12 educational community. They have a great resource on their website that tracks where all the states are. They update it about once a day, and going in there and looking at it and seeing how things are changing, it's just remarkable. Right now, as of Friday afternoon when we were taping this podcast, there are 10 states that have ordered their schools closed for the remainder of the school year. That does not mean they're canceled. There was some confusion, I think, amongst the media, us included, about what that means. Again, we're going into uncharted territory with this thing. But 10 states have closed all physical school buildings, so no more physical class, no students going to class. In-person instruction has been canceled. Those states have moved to distance learning models. There are a couple other states that are recommending closures, and we will likely see these numbers increase over the coming weeks.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, it's really scary stuff, and I think these are preventative measures, right? You got to take a little prevention. It's a pound of cure, right? So these are necessary things, and I feel like it's kind of moving or matriculating through the country quicker now, and more people are really trying to socially distance, and that's really making a big part in the overall effect of how the distance learning's going on, all that sort of stuff. But Ryan, lots of people I'm talking to, it really is coming down to, hey, are you still paying your staff? What's going on there? I mean, there was a survey that you guys posted about drivers getting paid, and I thought that was really telling. Ryan, you want to give me a little bit about, what you're seeing when it comes to driver pay right now in the industry?
Sure. Well, again, this is changing every day. So when we ran that survey a couple weeks ago, I believe it was around 2/3 of the readers were saying, yeah, they were continuing to pay their drivers. That is really changing on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. I can't tell you how many emails I've received just in this past week alone from readers, a lot of school bus drivers, a lot at contractors who are basically just telling their stories and saying, hey, this is what's going on in our area. This is what has transpired over the past week or so. We've received one update one day, and then the next day it's another message. Some school bus drivers have been furloughed, or they're being told to reduce their hours. It's really an ongoing ebb and tide with what's going on out there. What we're seeing is a lot of districts, especially when it comes to the contractor side, a lot of the districts are withholding payment. And one contractor put it really well and said, if the money is not coming in, it can't go back out to the employees. And it's really heartbreaking what's happening. You see a lot of school bus drivers who we all know do not make exorbitant salaries. They A lot of them have multiple children at home. Some are single parents. And this has become a big, big stress on them. But regardless if they have had their hours reduced or they've been laid off or furloughed. So, this is going to be an ongoing challenge, especially in light of the ongoing driver shortage, right? One of the hopes, I think, when this coronavirus broke and it really started to affect the economy was the logical thinking that, well, the last time we were in a recession not too long ago, that was a very big recession in 2008, really didn't start affecting the school industry, education, school districts, transportation for another year or two. But what we really saw as a result of that was that it really positively impacted the driver shortage. A lot of people were out of work. Unemployment was high. People were looking for even additional, extra jobs, extra income. So they were becoming school bus drivers. As the economy has improved, those people have left in droves. And that's the current state that we've been in, this industry's been in for the past couple of years with this driver shortage, as well as mechanic shortage. So I think that there was a hope that this coronavirus, if there was any silver lining from it, that it would infuse more school bus driver applicants into the fold. Well, with a lot of these school closures and then transportation workers not getting paid, student transporters are telling me, hey, they need to go out and find another job because their rent or their mortgage is due. They have to feed their kids. If the industry really doesn't watch out, there could be an even worse shortage, because we got to remember this crisis is going to come to an end, or at least evolve, and life will, quote unquote, return to normal at some point. And that means students will start returning to school. Buses will start rolling again for their intended mission of delivering students. So some of these districts are really playing some Russian roulette right now if they're choosing not to pay their transportation. And I don't want to throw stones here because, it's got to be such a pickle to find yourself in if you're a superintendent or a school board, because their costs have not stopped either, even though there's no scheduled class going on at school buildings. They still have leases. They still have payments due. They are still, obviously, a lot of these states have come out and they've either passed measures or have steps in place to pay school district employees. And that's the key phrase there, school district employees. So a lot of the school bus drivers that work for in-house operations, they're a school district employee, they might not be getting impacted like the contractors are.
Ryan, I got to jump in here. But aren't school districts being funded? They've already been funded the money to pay their contractors. Like, how can you withhold payment and then it has an adverse, because those contractors are your business partners, right? Like, you count on those people to provide a very specific and needed service to your district. And by just saying, hey, we're not going to pay you, how do you take that, right? Like, in this sense, in the matter of time, where's the empathy in that? People losing their health care during a health crisis, people not getting paid, like, that's just not right. Like, how can they make those decisions and I don't know. To me, that just feels absurd. If you've been paid the money, why not continue paying your partners that you had an agreement with them and uphold that agreement? Why is it such a difficult thing? What do you think?
Well, that's the $60,000 question right now. No one really knows. We aren't in these administrative boardrooms where we don't know what they're talking about. You're right. The way that these funds normally work is that the budget is set a year in advance and the money is allocated. And certainly there could be some instances of when, money is in the general fund or it's pulled out of a general fund and goes to another area or department or to address some hole. But that's really what the contractors are scratching their heads over. So without really knowing much more information, we are under the assumption of that school districts just, or at least some of them at least, are just not paying. And whether that's out of fear or some school attorney is telling them that because there is no technical school bus service and maybe they're looking at the contract, it's such a case-by-case basis that it's really hard to nail it down. But certainly that's the frustration that you just mentioned. That's the frustration that the contractors are having because they are having to let go or reduce the hours or pay of their staff. And so many of these businesses, no matter how large or small, are really family businesses. And that's really what the industry is predicated on as well, family. So it's a really tough time to see your staff going through that when you don't have the answers. It's bad enough to have to lay people off if you lose a contract or whatnot, but when you have the rug pulled out from under you like this, it just makes it more difficult.
Well, Ryan, with the CARES Act, the stimulus package, right? That being passed, HR 748, right? So it passes unanimously. The House passes it. The president signs it. $13.5 billion, about 44% of the budget, right? The total $30.75 billion of the Education Stability Fund portion goes to elementary and secondary education schools, right? So that bill or that act, it's predicated that people continue to pay their staff and pay their partners. So are people seeing like gray area, like, well, our staff isn't the contractor, so therefore, so they don't feel that the contractor staff is an extension of the school district? I mean, I would beg to differ. I feel that those people, those drivers would say, those are my kids. That's who I drive, right? Like, how do you not feel that that's an extension of your team? I think that partnership is about that. I mean, STN, we use a lot of contractors, but I view those people as extensions of our team, right? Those are people that we care about and they care about us and they go above and beyond. So I don't know. To me, it doesn't make sense. And I just really can't figure out the thinking behind it, especially if there's an economic stimulus coming that pretty clearly spells out that you need to keep paying people because, that's what's best for everyone. And it's the human thing to do, right? So, I mean, my mind is like spinning on how that's even possible. Why? I don't get it.
That's certainly the intent of that one provision in the CARES Act, and the National School Transportation Association is pretty clear in its guidance. They were basically the ones that got this language in there, and it does not just mention the contractors, by the way. It's school employees as well. So it's really supposed to be a parachute available for everyone, and it does say to every extent possible that schools need to continue to pay their drivers. So again, if school districts are bringing their attorneys into the fold, which they likely are, the attorneys might be pouring through that. I've gotten some emails from state departments that have asked to get specifics on the bill because their governor is asking for it. They're trying to go through the letter of the law and essentially see, what do we have to do? And that's what it really comes down to. Unfortunately, it's coming down to money, and that just is horrible. But that's what makes the world go round. And, it's a sad state of affairs when you have these employees who, whether they're a public or private employee, that they have dedicated their life to educating children, making sure that children can get to and from school safely. They're not paid well at all. I mentioned that previously. I think that we have seen the national pay average go up slightly over the past year, but still, when folks can get their CDL and then go work for a trucking company, and by the way, the trucking industry is getting even more decimated by this, and that's a whole nother topic, but there's so many other avenues that folks can go, and they can take their CDL and get paid more money, not have to deal with the aggravation, the stress, not have 60 kids, on the bus and all those lives in their hands. there's a lot easier ways to make more money. And it's just, it really is a sad state of affairs of what we're seeing. And what's been explained to me by the National School Transportation Association is that these districts, if they're not paying, that they don't see the ramifications of this. I mentioned this earlier as well, that at some point, school is going to get back to normal. Kids are going to be going back to school. And if these decisions made today by school districts could come back and really haunt them, because if they drive their contractor away, their school bus drivers away, and then suddenly we have to remember that it's, we think it's only April, beginning of April. But before we know it, we're going to be in the summer months. School districts right now traditionally always use this time to start preparing for the coming school year. Operations start winding down. They're looking forward. They're purchasing new buses. They're scheduling maintenance in the summertime. They're scheduling installs. They're doing all this work. And if districts stop paying, all those services could go away. Then what happens when July 1st rolls around and we're only weeks out from the new school year and there's no transportation solution in place? That's a very big dilemma that districts are going to be facing.
We know that businesses are shut down, right? Like OEM manufacturers have shut down manufacturing of new school buses. So, it can't be business as usual, right? Like you can't expect, hey, I'm going to place my order on the usual Tuesday and expect my buses to be delivered on, August 1st when school starts the next week, right? Like, is there going to be a tsunami of orders? There's going to be all this backlog because nobody's working, can't cut a PO to order new buses or buy parts, or no service is being done on a very limited basis, right? So, how are districts going to get up to speed fast enough? I think you got to lean on your local dealers that are probably ground stocking vehicles. I spoke to a dealer today out in Texas who, he has maybe 230, 240 school buses on the ground. Those are going to get gobbled up real quick if the manufacturers aren't able to turn around the vehicles at the rate the customers have enjoyed, right? The leisurely, hey, can I order my buses when I get them delivered? How much delays are going to happen? That also, what about chassis, right? If we're dependent on chassis from other manufacturers or supply chain, what's that going to do to everything? So, there's definitely a big ripple effect beyond just staff, right? Like you better have your staff in place, but also you're going to need the equipment to operate to get these kids to and from school. So those are just huge things that I'm hearing in the market, right? Are we just going to see a tsunami of orders, or what's it going to look like? Are people just going to try to get by with what they have? How are people? What are new students that start in these schools, or how they get them up to speed? You got to work with your technology partners and things like that. So there's some big challenges ahead for all these districts and partners. And God, you got to lean on your contractor partner too to make this all happen. So I don't think you should be abandoning them in the hour of need, because it's going to come back to haunt you later, I think.
Exactly. That's my point. The districts, if they're shutting down transportation, it's going to be extremely hard just to flip the switch and start that back up. Talking with Kurt Maxson last week, who's the executive director of the National School Transportation Association, and he was saying, to that point, not getting into even the supplier side, like you said, we could go for days and go down all these different rabbit holes of the potential impact of this thing. But really, I think it comes back to the district has to keep funding, has to keep those wheels oiled, pun intended, I guess, and continue to have those resources in place and ready to roll. And that means, as an extension, you need to continue the relationship with your dealers, your technology providers, your OEMs, even if, through the dealers, even if they're closed. There's just so many angles to this thing. But really, it comes back to districts need to make sure that they place the same impetus on transportation as they do education. And that's always been the issue with school transportation, right? It's always been considered kind of the red-headed stepchild. And until educators across the board, administrators across the board, principals, teachers, they view the school bus in the same way as they view the classroom education, there's never going to be that true balance. And I think that what we're seeing right now is some ramification of that, where districts are showing their true colors and they're siding with the classroom and not thinking about transportation, or saying, oh, well, we'll come back to that. That's not essential right now. Well, that's the wrong way of thinking.
All right, friends, we're going to take a little break and recognize our podcast sponsor today, TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, is pleased to bring you this STN podcast series, a podcast focused on school districts' new mission in response to the coronavirus. TransFinder is pleased to announce the release of its web-based routing solution, Plus, available for any school district to test drive for free in the safety of your own home. TransFinder is also making available for free its Stop Finder two-way communication tool to any district for the remainder of the school year. To learn more about the solutions, go to transfinder.com or email marketing@transfinder.com. All right, back to the podcast. Well, friends, welcome back. Want to talk a little bit about some of the free webinars that School Transportation News has been offering. Mr. Ryan Gray and a fabulous panel of experts recently did a webinar on our website. If you go under multimedia on the STM website, you can find the free webinar on empowering student transporters amid COVID-19. Really, really great content. Ryan, you want to share a little bit about, that webinar and some of the big highlights that came out of it, and tantalize people maybe to go listen to it or enjoy it for themselves?
Sure. And you can find these webinars, by the way, if you go to our news drop down on stnonline.com and click on multimedia. So that's where you're going to be able to find our webinars, as well as other great content like videos in this podcast. So check that out. But yeah, with that webinar, we had a great panel of experts. So we really wanted to touch on the physical and mental well-being of employees, and bring some student transporters in to be able to answer some questions, because we knew there was going to be some operational questions as well. So spearheading our panel was Dr. Steven Soroka, who some of you may remember was a keynote at STN Expo Reno in 2017. We actually are speaking with him to get him back into our keynote fold this summer or later this year with our conferences. But he's an infectious disease expert. That's his background. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a medical expert to talk about coronavirus. The point was not to wash your hands for 20 seconds and be singing the Journey song or whatever to make sure that you're cleaning yourself properly, or the social distancing. It was really more of a message of what he called the 3 H's: hope, honesty, and hunkering down. So we're obviously all got the hunkering down part. We are, a lot of us are working from home. Our kids are at home. Life as we know it has ground to a standstill. But amid that hunkering down, he talked about hope and honesty. And we touched a little bit on the necessity to have honesty in our previous segment, talking about the relationship between districts and transportation and contractors and whatnot. But really that, we're going to see our ways through this. And we got to be prepared to provide the industry and the employees with the tools that they need to get through it. Obviously, pay is one of them. We talked a great deal about that. But beyond that, what else can the industry do? We also had Dr. Adam Sains, who is a school psychologist, a PhD as well. He talked from the mental health standpoint. What can we do to provide some clarity to the situation? How can we address the mental wellness of our staff. There is obviously a lot of fear and anxiety right now. What are some tools that we can foster? So he talked a little bit about the importance of being mindful, some exercises, but really he encouraged people to go out and find the tools that work best for themselves. And the companies and the districts, they have a hand in this as well. So communication at times like these is paramount. So we talked with Cook Illinois Corporation, which is the largest school bus contractor operating in Chicagoland. So they had two officials on the call. Steve Miller, who is the director of human resources. So he talked about that communication piece. And we also had the director of recruiting, Julius Caesar. I teased him that he survived the Ides of March to be with us. So he was there to talk about how recruiting cannot just cease right now. We were talking earlier about operations need to continue to the best of our abilities. So while there's not much certification of new drivers going on, the training has gone more online. There are things that districts and school bus companies can do to keep their name out there in front of job applicants. There's obviously a lot of restaurant workers that we know that have been put out of work because of coronavirus. There are opportunities within this, and this is the subject of my April column. With resiliency, we can find solutions, and we need to be resilient. So this webinar was really about that hope, empowering people to try to embrace the positive amidst all the negative news headlines that we're reading and the negative impacts that we're seeing affect friends and loved ones. We also had Ryan Hahn, who is a former transportation director in Oregon and is now a student transportation consultant. And he talked quite a bit about that communication as well. And he answered some operational questions. Some people have some questions kind of basically to your point earlier, Tony, about what happens next. How do we continue to grease the wheels, if you will, of our operation? What does this mean to budgets and moving forward with supply chain? So it was a really constructive conversation. It took about 90 minutes. We answered a ton of questions, but I think people came out of it just feeling a little bit better about themselves, about the industry. It's always about sharing information. And that was the point of this thing. So again, if you're interested, if you wanted to watch the whole thing, we do have it recorded. Just go to stnonline.com, go to our news drop down and click multimedia. And you'll find after a quick registration, you'll get right in and be able to partake in the entire event.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. Also, I had the opportunity to host a webinar, prior week, and it was definitely really good. It was COVID-19 servicing students who can't get to you. And it talked a lot about the food delivery side of things and leveraging your partners. We talked to Hickman Mills School District, Dr. Carl Skinner, who's the Deputy Superintendent of Student Services, and also the Director of Student Services, Teresa Tanner. And they shared a lot about what Hickman Mills was doing in Kansas City and all their efforts and how they were leveraging partners. They contract with Apple Bus Company, and they were talking about how Apple Bus was really stepping up to the plate to help them and support them. And they were someone who was leveraging their contractor partner and supporting them through these hard times. And they also talked about working with their other partner, ALC Schools, who does alternative student transportation that does, home to school. Well, now it's a school to home with the food deliveries. And what was so interesting about that conversation is Dr. Skinner had said that when they were driving around on the deliveries going to bus stops, they had a very small delivery rate, almost 25%. They were making thousands of meals, but only delivering 25%, where they were leveraging ALC Schools, and they were getting 95 to 100% delivery, because they were going to people's homes. They didn't have to leave their home because so many states are saying, don't leave your home, right? Shelter in place. Don't be around crowds. crowds, people crowding at bus stops. It's kind of it's a tough spot to be in because you want to get food to people, but at the same time, you want them to socially distance as well. So very interesting thoughts and synopsis. So you can also check that webinar out on our website. But we're out of time, friends. And I want to thank my co-host, Ryan Gray, for all the great thoughts. Ryan, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll see everybody for the next School Transportation Nation podcast. And we thank you for joining us, friends. Take care. And thanks again to our sponsor, TransFinder, for sponsoring this podcast series.